So let's settle in and talk about a real puzzle. Out in the deserts of Peru, not far from the famous Nazca lines, some very strange things have been found. Mummified bodies with only 3 fingers and 3 toes. And they've kicked off one of the most fascinating and heated debates in recent memory.
I mean, just look at them. These figures with their really long skulls and those 3-fingered hands, they look like they walked right out of a movie. So it's no surprise at all that they've grabbed the world's attention and fueled all kinds of speculation.
And that really gets us to the heart of it, doesn't it? That's the core question we're going to explore together. We're going to try to carefully unpack the claims from the counterclaims and see if we can separate what might be real evidence from what could just be, well, really good showmanship. So here's our roadmap. First, we'll get into the mystery itself. Then, we'll examine the case for these being a genuine biological anomaly. After that, we'll look at the very strong case for them being a hoax. We'll dig into the most controversial evidence and finally ask, where do we go from here?
All right, so let's start at the beginning. The story really picks up around 2016. These mummified bodies started showing up near Nazca, Peru. They were apparently found by what are known as huaqueros, basically tomb raiders. So right from the get-go, the whole thing was shrouded in controversy.
And when you start listing out their features, you can see why it's such a head-scratcher. You've got these elongated skulls, the 3 fingers and toes, and they're not all one size. They range from pretty small, about 60 centimeters, all the way up to a human-sized one they call Maria. Some even appear to have metal plates under their skin. And they're all covered in this white powder, which turned out to be diatomaceous earth, a natural substance often used to dry things out.
Okay, so first let's step into the shoes of those who believe these are absolutely real, authentic, non-human beings. This viewpoint is really being pushed by a group of researchers who are, for the most part, working outside of the mainstream academic world.
The main person leading this charge is a man named Dr. Jose Zaltz. Now, his supporters often point to his background. He's a former director of the Mexican Navy's medical department. He is completely convinced. He says that after all the analysis, looking at every detail, from fingerprints to bone wear, these are, and I'm quoting him, 100% real biological organisms.
And to back that up, Dr. Zaltz's team says they've run a whole series of scientific tests. You know, this isn't just them looking at the bodies and saying, yep, looks real. They're talking about X-rays, detailed CT scans with 3D modeling, DNA analysis, and even forensic examinations of the tissue.
And that brings us to what the proponents would call their smoking gun. This is a scan of one of the mummies who they've named Montserrat. They claim it clearly shows she was pregnant, carrying a tiny 3-fingered fetus. Dr. Zaltz says this is something that would be, in his words, impossible to fake.
But wait, there's more. They also point to these other really strange findings. The metal implants? They say they're made of an alloy that includes osmium, which is an incredibly rare element. They also claim the skin seems to have grown around the implants, which would suggest they were put in when the creature was alive. Then there's the claim that up to 30% of the DNA is unknown. And to top it all off, carbon-14 dating places them somewhere between 240 and 1250 AD.
Okay, so now let's flip the coin and look at the other side of this argument. Because while those claims are pretty wild, the pushback from the mainstream scientific community has been just as forceful.
This quote here from Flavio Estrada, a Peruvian forensic archaeologist, really sums it all up. He and many others are saying, look, these aren't some new species. They're basically dolls, cleverly put together using bones from different animals, maybe some human bones, all held together with modern glue.
So you end up with 2 completely opposite interpretations of the exact same evidence. One side sees a real, non-human creature with unique anatomy. The other side sees a clever fake, arguing that the skulls are just modified llama brain cases and that the bones don't fit together naturally at all. They're just glued in place. And then there's this other layer of complication, the involvement of Jaime Maussan. He's a very well-known ufologist, and his connection to the story makes a lot of scientists uneasy, especially because he was involved with a different mummy, the Atacama mummy, which was later debunked. When he presented these new bodies to the Mexican Congress, claiming they were aliens, it created a huge spectacle, but it also made the scientific community even more skeptical.
So with these 2 camps so firmly dug in, let's zoom in on the evidence that's most fought over, specifically the DNA claims and the supposed endorsements from universities.
This is where you have to read the fine print, because it gets confusing. That big claim about 30% unknown DNA, well, it's never been published in a major peer-reviewed scientific journal. And when it was implied that a major university in Mexico, UNAM, had backed these findings, the university had to put out a statement saying, "Whoa, hold on, we only did carbon dating back in 2017. We never said anything about what these things are." Other studies have suggested they might be a previously unknown hominid species, so part of the human family tree, but not necessarily ET.
Now, the proponents also bring in historical evidence, like these ancient petroglyphs from the same region in Peru. And you have to admit, when you look closely, they sure do look like figures with 3 fingers. The supporters say, "See, this is proof. Ancient people saw these beings and drew them on the rocks."
And that pretty much brings us up to today, where the whole debate is still going strong. The truth, whatever it is, feels stuck in this deadlock between 2 completely different worlds.
The whole thing really boils down to this idea of the burden of proof. The proponents are saying, the evidence is here, it's compelling, and it deserves to be taken seriously. The skeptics, on the other hand, are standing by that old scientific rule. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary, peer-reviewed evidence, and they say that just isn't there yet. And then you have the Peruvian government, which is looking at this and saying, this is probably just part of the illegal trafficking of historical artifacts.
So, we're left with these huge, unanswered questions. Can anyone prove, one way or the other, that the fetus in Maussan are real? Why hasn't any of this DNA research made it into a top-tier scientific journal? But here's the really tough one for the skeptics. If these are fakes, how were they made so well using parts that carbon dating says are hundreds of years old?
In the end, the Nazca bodies are this strange, modern riddle wrapped up in ancient bandages. They sit right at the crossroads of archaeology, ufology, and forensic science. And they make us ask some really fundamental questions about what counts as evidence, what it really takes to prove something extraordinary, and what happens when all of that gets tangled up in a really, really good story. Whether it's a story about a lost piece of our world or just an incredible deception, the final chapter still hasn't been written.